Hi everyone, this is Prashad Parthiban. Today I'm going to talk about an important service in AWS which is S3, and we'll also see how S3 can be used in property and casualty insurance. By definition, S3 is otherwise called a simple storage service where you can store any kind of data. It can be image, XML, database, etc. etc. And the benefit here is it is like scalable, like as much as data you put in, it's going to accept and it's going to accordingly scale the size of the S3. Now, if you see this presentation, Amazon have given us different types of S3. When I say different types, different classes. Why so? Each company will have an unique need. Some company will say, I need to access the data within milliseconds. Some company will say, this data is not an important data, so I'm not worried about the speed, but I need good discounts. So S3 or like as AWS have come up with different classes to cater to different kinds of customers. Now let's see one by one for each of these classes. To start with, the first class is S3 standard. This is the default class in AWS. Reason is this is the S3 class where you can access the data very quickly, and at the same time it's going to be very optimized. So for example, if you see this in PNC insurance, any active claims or enforced policies that you have to access very quickly or very often can be stored in this S3 standard. Because of the fact it is very quick and very optimized, the pricing of this S3 standard could be a little bit higher. Now, the second kind of class is S3 standard infrequent access. Now, this is a kind of storage class where you may access the data not that frequently, maybe a weekly once or monthly once. But when you need the data, it should be accessed quickly. The retrieval speed has to be quick. So if you take PNC insurance, historical claims, once the claims are closed, sometimes you may need the claims for no audit purpose, etc. Similarly, expired policies, right? Like example, workers' compensation. If you want to do final audit on expired policies, you need to access those. Even though you do it less frequently, but when you need it quickly. So in that cases, you can use this S3 standard IA, which is otherwise called as infrequent access. The third one is S3 one zone infrequent access. This storage class is going to have only one kind of availability zone. If you take S3 standard or S3 standard IA, you will see multiple availability zone. To put it in a simple way, like you will store this data in multiple regions or multiple places so that even if one region got collapsed, you'll be able to restore the data from another region, right? So your data is not going to be lost, or even if it's lost, you can recover it from the other region. Whereas in S3 one zone, they store this in one particular availability zone. If something happens to that availability zone, your data is lost. So what kind of PNC insurance data you can store? Say example, if there is an internal report which is not that critical, or if there is a secondary backup, apart from primary backup, if for some reason you want to store some secondary backup. So those kind of data can be stored in S3 one zone IA. Because it's only one availability zone, the cost is going to be less compared to S3 standard and S3 standard IA. The next one is S3 intelligent tiering. Now, this is more of machine learning kind of storage class, right? You have this storage in working in such a way that, say, your data could be in S3 standard for 3 weeks. Later, if the system knows that you are not accessing this data more frequently, it can automatically move that from S3 standard to S3 standard IA, right? It can look at the pattern and it can automatically adjust the movement of the data so that you can save your cost. For example, if there is a climb, adjusters have entered the nodes. Initially, when the climb is active, you may look at the nodes often, right? But as it goes, when the climb is closed, you may not look at it. So system will look at it and move this data from S3 standard to S3 standard IA. Similarly, customer interactions, when there is an interaction, when there is policy issuance process, you may look at their notes often. Once the policy is issued, you may not refer to them very often, so that it can be moved. The next one is S3 Glacier. This is an archival kind of storage, right? Where you don't need the data very often. You want to kind of archive it for future reference. You use this. Again, even though it's archival, still you will be able to retrieve the data in maybe hours or minutes sometimes based on the needs. So long-term compliance data, right? Even though you have any PNC insurance policies that are expired, sometimes you need it for a compliance team to be sent to the ISO bureau. So you can store those kind of data in S3 Glacier or historical customer data, right? Once the policy is expired or the customer is no more with the particular insurance carrier, they left, but still you need that for some kind of future reference. You can store that in S3 Glacier. The next one is S3 Glacier Deep Archive, right? This is more kind of less cost, but still, if you want to access the data, it may take maybe days or weeks sometimes. So because of the fact it is like low cost. So legacy system, say you have a system where you retired it and you are in a new system for the last 1 year. For just any reference purpose or audit purpose, you want to store that data, you can store it in the legacy system backup because you are not going to access it at all for some reason. Or historical underwriting files. For some reason, 10 years back, there was an underwriting rules or some, follow underwriting rules or some kind of underwriting data that you used and you're no more using it. Just for reference purpose, you can store that in this kind of S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Again, these are the different classes and some of the use cases. Long story short, S3 is a storage service which shows any data as an object. And as I told you, S3 is a kind of, you can look at it as a bucket and you can scale the size as it grows. So that's one of the benefit. And it's one of the important service for machine learning because machine learning is all about data, right? Like you have to load data, you have to process data. Based on the data, you have to infer results and then put the data back to the database, right? And S3 is going to be a very important factor when it comes to machine learning.